Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Wrestling Underground podcast. I'm your host, as always, Chad Porto, and joining me is Marcus Green. Marcus, welcome to the show once again. How are you?
Good, man. Our countdown continues of the best or worst. This week is all about hands being thrown, if you will.
The biggest of hands being thrown. We're talking the 10 greatest backstage brawls. 9 and 1 that happened at an airport. So I'm just scouring the news. There really isn't any news to worry about at the moment. So there's nothing we need to talk about. Although, apparently, I think Luke Hawx was in an episode of Cobra Kai, but I have not seen him yet because I'm only on episode 9. But Tyrone Woodley and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson of the UFC, or in Wonderboy's case, of the UFC, he got taken down by the little kid in episode 8 when they were trying to show off how talented they were in front of those judges. And I'm like, dude, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson's taking L's even on television. Like,
Yeah,
this dude can't snap his losing streak.
yeah, it's interesting. Shout out to the kid, by the way, because that other kid is completely annoying, and I want him to get hit by a small vehicle, like a bug, not like a full sedan. But the two talking about something.
I want a dude to drive by and hit him with the door. Not enough to cause any real bodily harm, but enough for him to realize, yeah, I've done something to earn that.
or be in that episode where Urkel was in the garage and the whole thing came down. That, like, they want him to be, they want him to catch the full weight of that. But yeah, I didn't realize, that was Tyron Woodley until, because I'm like, they keep, every time they go to him, they keep the camera on him for about a second long. I'm like, should I know this black guy? And they're like, holy hell, that's, and of course I realized that after he got dropped. What is that? But it's like, okay, that tracks. That makes sense. I'm like, okay, yeah. Glad he got to do that, by the way. That's a cool drop.
It's fucking hilarious. Yeah, I still remember Tyrone Woodley trying to be like, yeah, boomy, boop, doop, boop. I'm like, oh, God. Cringe factor, you brother. Oh, that's rough. So we are doing 5 backstage fights apiece. I don't know if we've been doing 10s or 5s, but I think 5 each is more than sufficient because some of these can drag on. But I want to start first because I want to tell you this story about why I'm picking this one. So my first one, Marcus, starts with JBL and Steve Blackman. And it happened at an airport. Now, let me give you some context about who JBL is and who Steve Blackman is. This is not a progenitor to the fight, but it is a moment that will help put the fight in context. So at some point, Steve Blackman and Bob Holly were driving, and JBL drove up behind them as they were driving to the next town, and JBL slammed his car into the back of theirs and pushed them at a red light into the intersection. Not something that you should be doing, but that's who JBL is. So at one point, Steve basically, he's had enough. Let's see. As I said before, and this is Bob Holly, Steve Blackman's probably the most dangerous man on the planet. If you piss him off, you might end up missing. Somehow, though, I got away with it. This is with him tagging JBL with a car. But he goes on to say, when we rode together, I would drive and scare him on purpose. One time we were heading to Chicago late at night in pouring rain. As we were crossing Illinois state line, we came up on 3 semi-trucks. It was hard to see because of the spray, but I was fixing to pass them anyway. Steve looked at me, and there was definitely fear in his eyes, and he asked, how can you see when I can't see? And I told him, I can see fine on this side. The closer I get to the semis, the more worked up I get. It was a 4-lane highway and sped up. Couldn't see a damn thing. Then I told him I couldn't see either. He was hot. I was just laughed at. and said, "What are you going to do? Hit me? I'll wreck the car and we'll both die." Steve got really mad at some other people, though. At the Kansas City airport, Steve and I were waiting around when Bradshaw came over. It was an early morning flight, and John was drunk from the night before. He started patting Steve's ass, and Steve said, "John, I don't play that shit. Knock it off." John patted him again, and Steve said, was getting brutally pissed. So he told John, the next time you do that, I'm going to knock your fucking teeth out. I love Steve Blackman. So, of course, John did it again. Steve whipped around and backhanded Bradshaw, popping him square in the face. John started swinging and missing, and his head was snapping back with each of Steve's jabs. Steve stepped back, planning to kick Bradshaw's knee out, but he got his leg caught in a bag handle. Al Snow and I grabbed Steve. Ron Simmons grabbed John, and we pulled them apart. Steve was walking back and forth like a bandy rooster looking for a fight. Before we left, Steve told him, "I'm going to fucking kill you." And he meant it, too. We got to our car and got on the road. Ken Shamrock was riding with us. Me, Blackman, and Shamrock. That's a dangerous car. And I'm the warm one, a teddy bear compared to those two. The whole journey, Shamrock was poking and prodded Blackman, telling him that Bradshaw was going to beat his ass. Steve wasn't saying a word. And who did we see when we checked in at the hotel? Bradshaw and Ron were right there. The boys don't always stay at the same hotel, so it was a complete coincidence and not a good one for John. He came over to apologize, and Steve said, "No apologies. I'm going to finish you later," then walked off. We found him in the gym still boiling mad. Once we were in the arena and had to sit down in catering, John walked in, everybody was silent, and Steve stood up. He said, "If you're going to say something, say it now, or I'm going to finish you in front of everybody." Bradshaw walked over and apologized and said, "I shouldn't have fucked with you," and shook his hand. And that was the end of it. Steve sat down and said, "Bob, if it weren't for that bag, John would be in intensive care right now." Trust me, I believe it. If anyone can put Bradshaw in the hospital with one kick, it's Steve Blackman. Steve Blackman is the greatest goddamn human being in the history of human beings. I know JBL gets his ass kicked a lot, Marcus, but Steve Blackman beating the shit out of JBL in an airport, that just hits right.
I mean, which is weird because he's one of the bigger fellows.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I just only for aesthetic purposes. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't care what the scenario is. You can't play with somebody's ass.
Nope.
And all that'll get most people from 0 to 100, even if they're deemed docile or whatever. So yeah. Yeah, but screw JBL and let's keep the trend going.
Ooh.
Let's keep that trend going. Because on my list, JBL once again, being the a-hole that he is to just back in 2008 to Joey Styles.
Mm-hmm.
Joey Styles. Now I want to say the story goes that they was on a trip to Iraq, and JBL was being a drunk a-hole, which at that point just got taken too far. I think he ended up dumping a beer on Styles' head, and maybe said something slick about his family, and Styles just had enough, stood up, and through the brustling and tussling, I think Styles popped one off on him, caught him with a haymaker or something, and ended up knocking him on his ass in front of everybody. So the 6'6", big man got his ass handed for playing with the wrong one. Probably mostly because he thought he could get away with it because Styles is obviously smaller and he's just a ring guy. So. Mm-hmm. Again, JBL being an a-hole did not pay off, and your check did not cash when it needed to.
I think Matt Striker almost got into a fight with JBL too. JBL doesn't seem to be that hard of a guy to take down, which is hilarious.
It'd just be a big. I mean, considering he had one of the more brutal finishers, with the clothesline. Yeah, but again, that don't really mean nothing in real life because nobody's going to give you time to pop off a clothesline. So you might just be a big pile of mush that just is lanky and can't really get off. Like a big Pokemon that's just heavy. Da-da-da.
So now we're going to go and talk about another generational a-hole, and that's Shawn Michaels. Apparently, he not only did he piss off a bunch of Marines, but he may have pissed off 2 potential pseudo neo-Nazis. Now, one of the Harris brothers has an entire mixed race family. I'm going to go out on a limb and say he may not be the pseudo neo-Nazi, although they both do have SS tattoos. But that might be more biker culture than anything, but I digress. Needless to say, when you're 5'11", Shawn Michaels, and you get your ass kicked by Marines, you don't want to piss off 2 dudes who have no problem putting Nazi ink on your body. I mean, that's rule of thumb. You know? So, like, I don't know. Questions there. I'm going to read this verbatim from how it's written. It's no secret that Shawn Michaels was not the easiest person to get along with right in the 90s in the WWE. There are multiple reports of him offending and insulting his fellow wrestlers, throwing his weight around thanks to his stature with the company. Ron and Don Harris, a pair of twin brothers who competed under several gimmicks, were not ones to be taken lightly. The story goes that they once had a fellow wrestler watch the door and confronted Michaels in the shower, grabbing him by the throat and threatening him. The Harris brothers left the company not long after the incident, but eventually returned during the Attitude Era. So this must have been when they were known as the, the Bluths? Something like that. When they had long, crazy hair. When 2 dudes with SS tattoos surround you in a shower, Marcus, that's when you know you fucked up. That's when the voiceover goes, and this was the moment I realized that I had made a mistake.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Right? While Big Boss Man may have been Big Bubba Rogers in that day when Shawn Michaels was approached by the Harris brothers, both men were more than likely Big Bubba. And you don't drop the soap in front of Big Bubba. No, sir.
Yeah, that got to be because that's such a compromising position. I mean, you're already naked, and you would think nobody wants to fight naked, man. But in you know, certain spaces like prison or something, I mean, you know, catching somebody slipping is just catching somebody slipping. In that case, probably literally.
Yup.
Depending on what you do. So, man.
Don't fuck with the Harris brothers. Because they might be Nazis. Marius, what's your next one?
Yeah, sometimes you might feel like you can be boss hog walking around being called an animal. When you run into somebody who is literally from the streets, it don't always work out. So we, take this next one back to the early 2000s, if you will, mid 2000s. SummerSlam around that time where boy, one of my favorites, Big Dave Batista, was thriving on SmackDown. I guess kind of smelling himself, feeling himself, and he was, I guess, kind of being a big man on campus, if you will, backstage. And one, "We coming for you," Hulk Hogan and Booker T took offense to this and confronted the big man. And tensions kind of boiled over, and I guess the way that the story went, Batista was popping off, but they just wasn't landing with Booker T. And long story short, they got into it, whatever. Of course, for some reason, I don't know what. It's weird when dudes fighting, hair gets grabbed.
Yeah.
About hair getting grabbed, it's already like corny to watch when it's women, but you kind of understand / let it go a little bit. When it's dudes, it's just like, cut the crap. So yeah, they got into it. I think Batista got off a sucker punch, and Booker might have had a black eye. But the way, I guess, the collective consensus is that Batista didn't win the fight. So, which I can see, because Booker, is literally from the streets. He's been he's been locked up before, so I don't think he's any stranger to confrontation and having to defend himself. So
Well, he called himself G.I. Bro for a reason. I think. He may have just called himself G.I. Bro because he liked the way it sounded. I don't know. I'm going to get a little funny on this one, Marcus. Arn Anderson once fought Disco Inferno. So this was back in the good old days when cell phones were a novelty. Apparently, Arn Anderson was on a plane with their WCW crew heading to a show. Mike Enos was on his cell phone during the flight, and Arn told him to hang it up. Enos didn't want to listen, so Arn threatened him. Obviously, Enos then hung up the phone because it's Arn goddamn Anderson. He pulls Glocks on Cody Rhodes' heads. So you know he's going to do some dumb shit. At this point, however, in the story, Disco Inferno, of all people, stands up, holds up 4 fingers, and says, "Hey, Arn, take care of him horseman style." To which Arn turns around and slaps Disco in the face, sending him stumbling to the ground. I have to imagine to a chorus of raucous laughter. Because fuck Disco Inferno. It may have been a one-sided fight, but considering the next Arn story I'm about to tell after yours, Marcus, I feel like we needed this palate cleanser. Because the next two are going to get real, real dark. Marcus, what's your next one?
Well, let's keep it light since you go dark. This kind of almost kind of feels like more comical, honestly, just because of the size differential. But going back to we go to 2014. Batista and Booker T was in 2006. We're gonna skip ahead to 2014, where the Celtic Warrior and Sheamus took offense to Sin Cara. I guess this was the original Sin Cara, or at least the one that WWE called original. Took offense to Sin Cara kind of taking it upon himself not to really play the politics backstage in terms of, shaking everybody's hand. He kind of, the way the story goes, apparently Sin Cara wanted to kind of just shake the hands of the people he deemed to be the big kahunas, if you will, and that didn't sit too well with Sheamus, who was really at this point, growing into a veteran in the locker room. He's definitely a veteran in there now, but always somebody who's kind of come off like a stand-up person. I guess, certain people take that whole handshake thing seriously more than other people. And, he didn't dig it. Sheamus didn't dig it. And apparently, he caught Sin Cara on the trainer's table and tried to strong-arm him. And Sheamus tried to get off another shot, and then Sin Cara took him down with a leg sweep. So, Cara allegedly, was able to get off a clean shot before, they got broken up. It's just funny because, like I said, that size differential, we've seen them have issues in the ring, but take that backstage and just now you got to be real serious when somebody like come in the trainer's room to deal with you, because at that point it's like there was just like I couldn't wait to put my hands on you at that point.
Yeah, and that's the theme for these. Is a lot of these backstage incidents seem to have some real animosity. Although Sin Cara has popped up a few times, but not all the same Sin Cara, because Simon Gotch also got into a fight with Sin Cara, but this was Sin Cara Negro, a.k.a. Hunico.
Yeah, which is weird too, because Simon Gotch is notoriously a douche.
Oh yeah, he's hardcore douche. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. I want to say there's 4 Sin Cara backstage fights. So my next one is going to be very famous. It's Arn Anderson and Sid Vicious. I read a bunch of top 10 lists to kind of refresh my memory on some ideas, and none of them brought this up, and I do not know why. So the story goes that Arn and Sid had kind of been butting heads for a while. And overseas, I want to say they were in England, maybe they were in Germany. Things finally came to a head, and they got into a fight in a hotel. And it started with Arn, I want to say, grabbing a fork, and Sid getting a hold of it, and then Sid promptly stabbing Arn 20 or 30 odd times, sending Arn to the hospital. So it's arguably the most violent backstage fight that didn't result in a death. Because I would still say that the death of Bruiser Brody is the most violent of all time, because no other backstage fight that I'm aware of or remember caused a wrestler to die. But there's
Yeah.
nothing favorite about a dude dying, so obviously I'm not going to include it. But the idea of Arn and Sid stabbing each other violently with a fork, of all things, I find that amusing. Because you're not going to do a lot of damage with a fork. Not unless you go for the eyes. Like, you're going to have a lot of dull, minor, little puncture wounds. So I think that's funny as shit. The only thing that would have made it funnier is if it was like a toothed spork. Yeah, they got into a spork fight. You mean a fork fight? No, I do not.
Yeah, you're right about that, because that Bruiser Brody thing is just tragic all the way around. That happened like that went down almost. It really went down like it was in jail. So really messed up. But yeah, that's. I just wouldn't want to get into it with Arn in general.
I mean, he's willing to shoot Cody Rhodes in the head. Of course not. Like, he's dangerous, Marcus.
Like, he can take a shot. He's one of the OGs. He can. If he get you down, it's gonna be a problem. You know. And if he get up, because if you might be able to catch him off guard, because obviously he's older. Look like one of them guys that got one of them knockout hooks if you pop it off. So yeah, but I'm glad that didn't go the way it could have went.
He looks like the guy who, if you approach him at a table, will always, no matter if he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt and shorts, will always pull out a 12-gauge shotgun from somewhere. Like, he could be at a nudist resort. You see him eating his eggs and spinach omelet. You walk up, and then all of a sudden, you're looking for a fight, and he just pulls out a fucking shotgun and puts it on the table. You're like, oh, shit, what the fuck did you hide that thing, Arn? Like, Arn is very much, what's his name? Clint Eastwood from Gran Torino. That's how I imagine him.
Yeah.
All right, my turn? No, your turn.
Yeah, my turn. Oh, let's see. I'm gonna go with Bumpy, man. Let's take it here. Somebody who notoriously comes up across these lists. Just because, I mean, you know, just go ahead and call the man a brave and the bold. Chris Jericho, WWE Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer, certainly wrestling legend Chris Jericho. What this was back in 2016. Decided to be the bravest of them all, and this is years after he had confronted, you know, one of Chad's favorite wrestlers of all time, in Goldberg. He decided he wanted to up the ante a little bit. Not too much.
He is a ballsy bitch, Marcus.
Ballsy bitch. He did not. He wanted to up the ante a little bit, test his metal a little bit. So apparently, with the SummerSlam match that Orton and Lesnar had, Lesnar, it came off like Lesnar kind of went off in the business for himself and was letting off some real brutal shots on Randy, to which, you know, I don't think anybody here in Jericho will contest, because it's Randy. But apparently Jericho was pissed off because he wanted to know the finish of the match, or certain particulars about the match, and was kind of going off backstage about it. Lesnar kind of, you know, walked up on the scene and told him to mind his goddamn business. Jericho took offense to this, and because I think Brock finger pushed him or whatever, Jericho got in his face, and I think Lesnar apparently decided this is one of the worst things you can do to somebody. Apparently Lesnar decided, when Jericho got directly in his face and I think pushed his forehead against his, Lesnar decided to kiss Jericho on the forehead. It told him to kiss him back or punch him. And Jericho just went off, pushed Lesnar into a wall, and, you know, it was a whole thing until they apparently got broke up by Vince and Triple H. So, you know, say what you want about Jericho, and there's plenty that you can say. You can't call the dude a wuss, you know, because I don't know most animals that would pick a fight with Lesnar, much less a human. So, you know.
Well, most animals that pick a fight for Lesnar end up on his wall.
This is true. This is true. But like, you know, like Chad said, ballsy bitch.
Jericho is a ballsy bitch. And I mean that in all negative and positive connotations possible. He's a bitch. but he's got balls. Like, I'll always give somebody their due, even if they're a douchebag. You could say I give them their due bag. I'll say myself out. Speaking of terrible, how terrible do you have to be to piss off Scott Steiner? Most nuns can piss off Scott Steiner, so I don't think it's hard.
And Samoa Joe.
Well, he is a fat bastard. You fat bastard. I never understood why Steiner called him a half-breed, though. Joe's 100% Polynesian. That insult never stuck. But him calling him a fat bastard, or calling Bully Ray a fat bastard, I laugh every time. I still laugh. I don't give a shit if Sanjay Dutt doesn't want to say the word fat in his household anymore. Fucking douchebag. I will laugh at anyone making fun of Bully Ray's weight because Bully Ray's a douchebag. And anytime Scott Steiner makes fun of anyone, I'm going to laugh because Scott Steiner's fucking hilarious. Scott Steiner's a South Park character come to life, and I just realized that.
Wait a minute, have they ever had him in the show?
No, but they absolutely should.
That's a missed opportunity.
Right.
That is a missed.
So, speaking of missed opportunities, this ultimately ended up being the reason why Kimberly Page was no longer on WCW television in 2000 or ever again. So, at some point in 2000, I want to say June or July-ish, somewhere in that area, Kimberly Page, probably June, Kimberly Page reported to the higher-ups that Tammy Lynn Sitch, a.k.a. Sunny, had a mysterious substance in her bag. Now, Tammy Lynn Sitch has always been a fan of the powder. She's a longtime skier, first-time NA attendee. And so, basically, this was one of the big reasons why Sonny and Chris Candido ended up losing their gigs was because they were using. Now, I don't know if Scott Steiner had an issue with the fact that he was friends with Chris, friends with Tammy, or he just didn't like tattling. When Scott found out that Kimberly had ratted out, narked, told on, whatever you want to say, reported, because I don't actually have a problem with that. If you show up to a company where you're doing high spots and dangerous stunts and you're high, yeah, you should get fired. So I'm 100% okay with Tammy Lynn Sitch and Chris Candido getting their asses fired. I'm fine with that. Scott Steiner wasn't. He found out what happened, and he chased Kimberly out of the building, literally. So the next week, her husband, Diamond Dallas Page, decides he's going to have some words with Scott. Now, Scott and DDP did not like each other for real. They had a feud in 1999 where many people were surprised that neither one ended up in a body bag because they were throwing some real haymakers in a backstage fight that was filmed for television. So here we are a year later, and DDP is looking to reenact that storyline for real. But Scott, being Scott and a former All-American wrestler who at this time isn't completely kind of stilted in his movement, basically just brutalized Page and then tried to gouge his eye out. Because that's what Scott Steiner does in a real-life backstage fight. He tries to blind you. They attempted to pull them apart. They did so. But everyone realized that had they not intervened, Scott Steiner would have ended Diamond Dallas Page's career that very night. This was during a time in Scott's life when he was very violent for real. And I think he was about a year removed from running over a construction worker on a highway entrance ramp because the guy was trying to block Scott from entering because it was under construction. So Scott has had some issues in his life. This is one of those days. Don't fuck with Scotty Steiner. Like, people talk about Ming, don't fuck with Scott Steiner.
Yeah, man, that was that. Oh, it was Scott Steiner in general, man. It's just not a good deal. He also holds on to things. So there's that. But got to round out mine, man. We're probably one of the best ones, I would imagine. 1997, probably one of the greatest and ran into the ground wrestling controversies all time, being a 1997 Montreal Screwjob. We all know the story, the particulars of whatever, how everything went down, yada yada yada. Like I said, it's been running to the ground. If you don't know, you just you you haven't really watched or listened to anything wrestling related, really, um, over the last 20 some odd years. But I got to finish off my list with versus Vince. That
Ooh.
backstage altercation, because the situation was so crazy, man. Obviously, like I said, we know the particulars. Brett may have been defecting. Vince couldn't, you know, take any chance of having the belt on him. Needed to get it off him by any means necessary. Set up a situation backstage before the match. A situation to go down. We saw it went down. Bell got called. Brett didn't tap. Um, Michael ran off with the title because, like I said, Vince needed to get it. The infamous spitting in his face was one thing. Then he got backstage, and Brett was obviously rightfully livid. Sean was, told to deny it, which he did um, vehemently. Uh, but when he got to Vince, really wasn't much talking to be had, and he hauled off and knocked him on his ass, I think. And I think Taker was there, and him being the pillar of the locker room that he is, he kind of knew the situation was livid itself, but knew the situation had to go the way that it went. And just imagine anybody with all the arrogance of the pompous arrogance of Vince McMahon, um, kind of take that on the chin the way that he did, because he really didn't have no other choice.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just the visuals of that, like I wasn't there. There's no footage of it, but I feel like I can. That's one of the backstage fights that you've heard about so many times that you could vividly see it in your mind.
Now, you're correct in saying that there's no footage of the fight, but there is a movie that actually curtails and details the entire event. It's called, what is it, Wrestling with Shadows. And they were
Mm.
filming it independently of anything just to follow Bret Hart around. And they were happening to roll footage during Survivor Series 97. And there's footage of Bret's wife yelling at Shawn Michaels going, "Did you know? Did you know?" And Shawn's like, "I swear to God, I didn't know. I swear to God." And I'm thinking to myself, like, Bret's first wife is maybe in her late 30s at this point. She's a little frumpy, a little short. And I fully believe that she was about ready to beat the shit out of Shawn Michaels in that shot. Like, it's not staged. Like, all of this was real it was a documentary that picked up all of this nonsense. So it's very interesting because there is some backstage footage of the ancillary stuff, not the fight in question, but the lead up to it. And there's even a shot of Bret after punching Vince where he sits down and they ask him what happened, and I think he's like, "I slugged him."
Yeah,
So it's a wild story that, even though it's well known, it's kind of like, not to such a degree, but if you weren't alive during 9/11 and you watch some of that footage, like, it hits home, like just how intense it was. Now, granted, this is far less dramatic and far less intense, but it's the
yeah,
same kind of thing. Yeah, you've heard what happens, but when you actually hear the testimonials and the interviews the day of, ooh, it does paint a very different picture at times. So,
yeah, man.
all right. So, two quick things I want to get your opinion on. We're gonna have a new AEW champion crowned. Who the fuck advanced? I think the final three of the final four are who? John Moxley, Jericho maybe, and then I think Sammy Guevara is gonna be one.
Yeah,
Because they can't just do a normal 8-man tournament; they had to do a 6-man tournament with Moxley, and I think it's Jericho getting a bye.
yeah.
So, who do you want to see be the new AEW champion?
Honestly, I would have never took it off Mox.
Mm-hmm.
He was, like I said, he was the best pandemic champion. He, he did all that, went and took care of himself. Um, Came back, and he's an MVP for them. He got on that show after that shit show that ended up being All Out. Um, was the whole 5 hour show. The guy ended up put in the shadows because of the post show scrum.
Mm-hmm.
He got on that mic and cut one of the best promos of the year, and showed why he is, um, one of their main guys. You know, we here not big Punk fans, and I think he's done a lot for the company in terms of all the notoriety and pushing tickets because that moment he came back was a wrestling moment for sure. But I don't really care to see him in the ring, and I don't really care to see him as champion. You don't really move the needle for me personally in that way. But Moxley, that's a guy you can depend on. That's a guy you want to have spearheading your stuff.